Hello everybody, I'm Thomas. Welcome back to another video. This time I'm back with some Turing Machine where I'm going to be showing you how to beat Turing Machine without asking a single question. And what's even cooler is if you don't have the game, you can actually play along at home by just printing out your own little sheet here, maybe having some scrap paper because you don't actually need any of the other components besides the cards that will be laid out here. This sheet here is something I found on Board Game Geek, and I will link it below. It's really nice because it has all 125 combinations of the different combinations of codes that can possibly show up. I also made this. This isn't super necessary, but it's just nice to have your initial deductions kind of somewhere. And then I recommend having a scrap piece of paper around. Before we get started, I have to give a huge shout out to Chris War on Board Game Geek. Without them, this video wouldn't even be possible. They are pretty active in the daily challenge thread that I have going on Board Game Geek, and they're one of the ones that has been figuring out how to do these 0 question problems and kind of walking through their process. So the questions today, I will be using previous daily challenges that Chris has talked about and walked through, and I just want to say a huge shout out to them because they are the ones that kind of inspired me to do this video. All right, so we're just gonna hop right into it. And today I'm gonna walk you through 3 different problems. One with 6 verifier cards, one with 5, and then another with 6. I'm not sure if it's possible with just 4 verifier cards. I don't think it is from what I've seen, but there's a chance that it's probably possible with a certain combination. I'll also have each of these different problems linked in the description with the little hashtag and the game code. So if you want to punch it in on the website yourself to pull it up for some reason, you'll be able to do that. All right, so here's the first problem all set up. I will go ahead and leave a moment here for if you want to pause and try to figure this out at home. You're more than welcome to do so. I will be going through a step-by-step process here in just a second of how to actually do it. It definitely involves finding initial deductions and then using those initial deductions to make more deductions, so on and so forth, so you just arrive at one answer. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. First initial deduction that can be made is looking at verifier D here. This is testing which shape is the smallest. And one thing we can deduce is that triangle has to be smallest, because if square or circle was the smallest, that means whichever number is the smallest, it's the smallest. And so in the case of 1 through 5, let's just say if like circle was the smallest, that means square and triangle could not be 1. Or square was the smallest, that means circle and triangle cannot be 1. But in either of those cases, with square or circle being the smallest, that means triangle couldn't be the smallest, which means triangle can't be 1. So if square or circle was the smallest, then this card would be redundant because this is checking if triangle is either equal to 1 or greater than 1. And if either of those two cases were the smallest, well then we would already know that triangle can't be 1. So that means for D, triangle has to be the smallest. And so over here on a little number chart, if triangle is the smallest, that means we can eliminate 1 for square and circle as a possibility, and then we can also eliminate 5 as a possibility for triangle. Okay, so that's our first deduction down. Now we can start looking at something else to kind of narrow down. And since we already know a bit of information about triangle, we can start using that to our advantage on verifier F. Verifier F is checking the sum of triangle and square compared to 6. Well, one thing we can figure out is that triangle, because we still don't know A, if triangle is equal to 1 or not, but if the sum of triangle and square was greater than 6, well then we would know it has to be greater than 1, because that means if even square was 5 for the highest, then that means triangle has to be something other than 1 to be more than 6. So that is not a possibility because that would make this card redundant. So triangle and square cannot be greater than 6. So a lot of times for these kinds of problems, you have to pose hypotheticals and then see where it kind of takes you. So for this verifier F, we know that it's not going to be greater than 6. So let's say, what if triangle and square was equal to 6? Let's say that is we tested it hypothetically and it came back true. So then verifier A, well, if it equals 6, and let's just say hypothetically again, triangle equals 1. Well, if triangle is 1, it equals 6, we know square has to be 5. But then this verifier B, that's checking if square is odd or even, we don't need that anymore. We know square is 5, we know it's odd, so that would make this redundant, so that's not a possibility. Triangle and square can't be 6 if triangle equals 1. So then the other scenario for triangle plus square equals 6, if we know triangle can't equal 1 in that scenario, what if it was greater than 1? Well, the other thing we got to keep in mind is triangle still has to be the smallest. So if we were to do like triangle equals 4, well, then the lowest square could be is 5, because triangle still has to be the smallest, and that doesn't add up to 6. If you were to go 3 and 4, that's 7, still doesn't add up to 6. So then the only way you could do it is if triangle were to equal to 2, and then square would have to be 4, because it still has to add up to 6, and triangle needs to be the smallest. But if it's 2 and 4, we kind of run into the same problem again, where B then becomes a redundant card, because if we know square is 4, we don't even need this card at all, because we know it's going to be even. So that's not a possibility. So we can rule out that triangle and square equals 6. That's not a possibility. So we know that triangle and square is going to be less than 6. And so if we know triangle and square is going to be less than 6, then that means that even if triangle was 1 and square was 5, that would equal 6. So square cannot equal 5. Okay, so looking back at card A, now that we have F figured out, that we know that triangle and square is going to be less than 6, for A, we still need to figure out, is triangle equal 1, or is it going to be greater than 1? Well, let's say it's greater than 1. So we still need to come up with a sum of triangle and square that's going to be less than 6, with triangle being more than 1. And the only possibility that works, because you have 3 and 4, well, that adds up to 7. That's no good. And you still need triangle being the smallest. So then the only thing you can really do is 2 and 3. But then, once again, we're back to this card where B is going to, if we know it's going to be 2 and 3, we know square. So we don't even need this card. So it can't be an answer. So with that, we know that for verifier A, triangle is going to be equal to 1. Now, one weird thing you kind of have to do when doing these problems is, I kind of talked about hypotheticals, and sometimes you have to see if that you can get certain answers without asking verifiers. So for example, if we said that we now know that triangle is equal to 1, we also know that triangle has to be the smallest. So for this card, if we said that, okay, if it has to be even for squares, that means it can only be 1 and 2 or 1 and 4, kind of ignoring what we already figured out about F. But if that was the case, well, then that means we would know if it's 1 and 2 or 1 and 4, both of those sums are less than 6. But then we wouldn't even need this verifier up here, because if we knew it's even, then it has to be less than 6. So we can figure out that square has to be odd and not even. And since there's only one option, we know that square is going to be 3. So we have our first 2 digits figured out. Okay, so that leaves us with still C and E that we don't know. Well, C, we can kind of figure out some stuff. The fact that we already know 2 of the digits means, well, there's not going to be 3 4s, and there's not going to be 2 4s. So at the moment, there can either be 0 4s or just 1. So then at this point, we're only working with a pretty small group of numbers. If triangle has to be 1, and square has to be 3, then we're only looking at these numbers right here. Minus, I guess, we know it can't be 1 3 1. So we're down to 1 2 3 4 different combinations. So what I like to do personally is then take my scrap paper over here, write these out, and then have a column for the verifiers we don't know, which at this case, it's still partially C and E we don't know, and then write out what each of those are for each of the codes. So I'll show you real quick. Okay, so as you can see here, we have the 4 combinations, and then verifier C I just wrote because we're testing number of 4s. So this has 0 4s, 0 4s, 1 4, and 0 4s. And then for E, we're testing if it's the sum is odd or even, which it's even, and odd. So one thing you can kind of see right away is that there's only one combination that's different because of the 4s. So we can rule that out, because if we were to test and it came back yes, that there's only 1 4, we have figured out the code is 1 3 4 without even consulting E. So that kind of makes it just redundant, and we can rule that out as one of the options. So we're left with 3 options. And the way I like drawing it like this is because then you can kind of see at a glance which combinations share the same results. So as you can see, 1 3 3 and 1 3 5 are both if there were 0 4s and the sum is even. But as you know in this game, there's only one code at the end, and this route would leave us with 2 codes, so we kind of can just eliminate them, and that leaves us with one code of 1 3 2. All right, here's the next problem set up. This is the 5 verifier problem we'll be going through. I'll give you a chance right now to go ahead and pause if you want to try to work through this one. It's pretty much the same process. They do have to do some kind of different thinking and a little bit different strategy towards the end. All right, let's start going through this problem. So one of the first initial deductions that should jump out is with D and C. So D is testing which number is the largest, and C is comparing triangle and circle. Well, if triangle was the largest, well then comparing triangle and circle, we know that triangle is going to be bigger than circle if it's the largest. Same goes for circle. Circle is the largest, it's going to be bigger than triangle, and that would make this card useless. So because of that, we can deduce that square has to be the largest for D. Okay, then using that information of square being the largest, we can look at A and try to start narrowing some of the options down. First option on here is that square is less than 4. Well, if square is less than 4, it's going to be 3, 2, or 1. Well, let's look at E. So if we know square is the largest, and if it's going to be less than 4, the highest it could be then is 3. But if it's 3 and the largest, then anything added less than that is going to be either 2 or 1. All of those answers, though, are going to be less than 5, which would just not, we wouldn't even need verifier E. It would make it redundant. So we can rule out that square cannot be less than 4. Okay, so we know that square is not less than 4. Is it equal to 4? Let's say hypothetically it is. Let's look back at verifier E. What's interesting is if it equals 4, then that means triangle is either going to be 3, 2, or 1. If triangle was 1, well then that's going to be less than 6. If it's 2, equal to 6, and if it's 3, greater than 6. Now what's interesting is each of those options corresponds to with each one of these. So if we knew that square was equal to 4 and it's less than 6, well then we know that triangle has to be 1. Or if it's equal to 6, triangle has to be 2. Greater than 6, triangle has to be 3. But then we have this verifier here, verifier B, that's checking, well, what is triangle? So just between this card and this card, if square was 4, we would be able to figure out what triangle is without even asking B. So that can't be the case. So that means square has to be greater than 4, aka 5. Okay, well now that we know square is 5, let's look back at E. Okay, well square is 5, then the lowest we can have triangle be is 1, which would total up to 6. So being less than 6 isn't even a possibility anymore. And if it equals 6, then we know triangle is going to be 1, and we're back to verifier B is then redundant, because then we've figured out what triangle is without even worrying about that verifier. So it can't be less than 6, triangle and square can't equal 6, so it has to be more than 6. And also now that we know that square is 5, since it's the largest, we can also rule out that triangle and circle cannot be 5 as well, just to kind of update the little numbers over there. Okay, so as it stands, we can kind of draw a line here, and everything above this is not necessary, because if we know square is 5, that eliminates everything above this line. So we're only working with stuff down here. Then if square has to be the largest, then we can also rule out this kind of bottom row as well, because there's other 5s down there. Same with this far right column here, that triangle being 5, well, we can't have that, so we can eliminate those. And we know the sum has to be greater than 6, so this far left column where it equals 6, we can eliminate those. So that leaves us with just 12 combinations. At this point, there might be more you could do, but I'm going to do what I like to do, which is just sketch the numbers out on my little scrap pad, do a column for B and C, which are the 2 verifiers we don't know, and then kind of write out what each of those verifiers are for that code. Okay, so these are the 12 codes we have, and the 2 columns filled out for if the first digit's odd or even, and then the column for verifier C, which is the first digit compared to the last digit, triangle compared to circle. So let's start with looking at B and looking at just the evens. Like I kind of mentioned before, there's only one unique solution. So if there's 2 codes that kind of have matching rows, you can cancel them out. So looking at even, we have an even equals here and an even equals here. So those are canceled out. And then we have even and greater than, and all of these down there for that. And then we have even and less than. So there's no unique solutions for even, so it can't be even. Looking at the odds, we have 2 that kind of cancel out, odd and greater than and odd than greater than. So that leaves us with just 2 codes, 353 and 354. So this is where things get a little weird, and you have to keep in mind the rule of Turing Machine that every verifier is needed. So what you need to do is see and kind of work backwards of taking each of these codes and trying to see if you could get the code without all the verifiers. So for example, let's just take 354. If you were to take that code, let's just say we know that's the answer. And then let's go back over here and erase this little number chart. So 354. Okay, so what we need to try to do is work backwards and see if we can get the code without one of the verifiers. So starting with 354, if we're saying triangle equals odd, so that means we can rule out 2 and 4. We know that triangle is going to be less than circle because that's what that option says. So then that means we can rule out circle being that. And if triangle has to be less than circle, that means triangle can't be 5. We know that square is going to be the largest. So that means circle can't be 5, square can't be 1. Then we can figure out that triangle can't be 1 because even if it was added to 5, that would equal 6. And we know it has to be greater than 6. So we can rule that out. So triangle equals 3. Okay, then going to what we know about circle from over here, circle has to be larger than triangle. So, well, if circle's not the largest, that means circle has to be 4. And then if square is the largest, that means it has to be 5. So we got back to 354 without even needing verifier A. Because of that, we know that 354 isn't the answer because we were able to find it without one of the verifiers. And you need all of the verifiers to find the answer. So 354 is not the answer, leaving with the final answer of 353. I know that one was a little bit weird, and it's definitely not the most intuitive or quick way to figure it out towards the end, but that is how you do that one. All right, here's the final problem we'll be going over today. It's another 6 verifier one. I'll go ahead and give you a chance to pause if you want to try to figure it out for yourself. I would say this one is easier than the last one, but it's still pretty tricky. All right, so let's hop into this. Let's just start with verifier B, counting the number of 4s. Well, because of E, which is testing if a number repeats itself in the code, if there was 2 4s, well, then we would know there's a double number. If there was 3 4s, then we would know there's a triple number. Both of those cases would make E redundant. So we can say that for verifier B, there's only 0 or 1 4. Looking at verifier C here, this is testing which number is the largest. Well, if square was the largest, looking at verifier F, that tests the order, if it's either ascending, descending, or no order. If square is the largest, since square is the center digit, then it would have to be no order, because if it's the largest in the center, well, then it can't be ascending or descending. So because of that, if square is largest, we wouldn't need this card, so that means square can't be the largest. Then looking at verifier E, this is testing if a number repeats itself. Well, if there was a triple number or a double number, both of those would mess with verifier F. Verifier F is testing ascending, descending, or no order. If there was a triple number, that's no order. If there's a double number, it's going to be no order. It can't be ascending or descending if there's a double or a triple number. So that means there has to be no repetition. And then finally, for verifier F, that's testing if it's ascending, descending, or no order. Well, looking at verifier E, if it was ascending, you can't have double or triple numbers if it's ascending. So that would make verifier E useless, because if we knew it's ascending, we know there's no double or triple. Same can go with descending. If it's descending, there can't be a double or triple number. There would have to be no repetition, making E useless. So that means for verifier F, we can deduce that there's going to be no order. Okay, so we still have a lot of numbers left. There's a lot I could go through these and cross off each one that has no repetition and no order. It's going to take a little bit of time though. Same with 0 or 1 4s. But what I'm going to do first is split these up a little bit. So looking at verifier A is testing if triangle is going to be less than 3, equal to 3, or greater than 3. So we can kind of just do something like this and split it up that way. So we got triangle equal to 3 in the middle, less than 3 over here, and greater than 3 over here. So now breaking these down into these 3 chunks, let's just start going through them one at a time. I'm gonna start with triangle being less than 3. So I'm gonna go through real quick and going through what we know, that there has to be 1 4 or 0 4s. Square can't be the largest. There's no repetition and there's no order. I'm gonna go ahead and cross out all the ones that don't follow those rules. Okay, so a lot of codes have been then eliminated. Just these 3 up here. We have 213, 214, and 215. So this is assuming, once again, for A, the triangle is less than 3. So then the things we still don't know, there's a couple of things. We don't fully know B, we don't fully know C, and we don't know anything about D. So real quick, I'll write the codes out over here. So there are the 3 codes with the B, C, and D verifier solutions. So number of 4s, this is testing what the largest number is. And then finally, there's more odd or evens. And as you can see here, 214, we would be able to figure out if we just knew B or if we just knew D, making one of them at some point redundant. So 214 can't be the option. And then using my little strategy of, we'll then just cross out rows that share the same stuff, because then these will be the same solution for these verifiers. So if there was no 4s, circle was the greatest, and more odds than evens, both of these codes would be valid, which can't be a thing because we are only have to have 1 unique code at the end. So neither of these can be the case. So we can kind of just rule out these 3 codes and know that triangle can't be less than 3. So we still have a lot of codes over here for triangle greater than 3. So let's try to take a crack at that. And we don't have to really do a process of elimination as much, because if triangle is greater than 3, it's either 4 or 5. Okay, well, let's look back at C. We still don't know what's the largest. We know it's not square, so it's either going to be triangle or circle. Well, if triangle was greater than 3, let's go with if triangle wasn't the largest. So if it's greater than 3, but not the largest, it's either 4 or 5. So at that point, it's going to be 4, which would make B redundant, because then we've already figured out there's a 4, not even having to worry about B. So then, okay, triangle can't be greater than 3 and not be the largest. So what if it was greater than 3 and the largest? Now at this point, we're gonna have to do a little bit of process of elimination. So greater than 3 and the largest. So we can rule out this whole column here, and then we just have this column of 5. So I'm gonna go through and eliminate stuff that doesn't work. Okay, once you eliminate all the codes of stuff we've already figured out, that leaves us with 6 codes, which I will put on my scrap piece of paper, and we'll start trying to see what the different verifiers look like for that and try to eliminate some stuff. Okay, looking at these codes, you can see one that jumps out right away. 524 is the only one where there's more evens than odds. So we can rule that out, because we could just ask verifier D, figure that out, and then wouldn't even need to consult B, so that's not an option. At this point, we can start going through and eliminating stuff that have similar results, because there can only be 1 unique solution. So that can cross out the 1 triangle circle, and then we are just left with circle, triangle, circle, circle, triangle, circle, circle, triangle, circle. So all the rest of the codes share similar verifier answers, which means there's no unique codes if triangle was greater than 3, so that means triangle has to equal 3. Let's look back at verifier C now. So we know that triangle is equal to 3. We know square isn't the largest. If we were to say that triangle is the largest, well, if it's 3, if largest is 3, looking back at verifier B, which we still don't know the answer to, the number of 4s, if 3 is the largest, there can't be a 4. So triangle being the largest would make B redundant, so that can't be a possibility. So for C, we know that circle has to be the largest. Okay, so looking back at this final little center column here, I'm gonna go through and eliminate everything that doesn't work with what we have so far. Okay, after all of that, we're left with only 4 possible codes: 314, 315, 324, and 325. I'm gonna go back to my little scrap piece of paper, erase what I have, and rewrite these codes with the verifier answers. Okay, looking at the 4 possible answers, kind of like in similar times before, we see that of all the answers, only for like verifier D, only 1 is different, and that's 324, which has more evens than odds. If we knew that, we wouldn't need to know anything about B, so that can rule that out as a possible option. It can't be 324, that would make B redundant. So then we're left with these 3 options. doing like I've done before, you cross out any ones that share similar verifier results because there can only be one unique solution. So 315 and 325 are out, leaving us with just 314 as the final answer. And that was the final question that I'm going to be doing here today. Hope you enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun doing it. Huge shout out to Chris War again on Board Game Geek. I wouldn't have been able to do this video without their walkthroughs that they've posted and finding these questions. So huge shout out to them. But thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, a like would be greatly appreciated. And until next time, I'll see ya.